You are the words and the music. You are the song that I sing. You are the melody. You are the harmony. Praise to your name I will bring. You are the Lord of lords. You are the mighty God. You are the King of all kings. So now I give back to you the song that you gave to me. You are the song that I sing.
Now, just so you didn't get the wrong impression, I hope you didn't go home today and say, honey, I think our relationship needs to grow, so let's fight. I hope you didn't do that. But as we do look at the conflict, we talked about this morning about how conflict can be healthy because it does a whole lot of different things. It can help us to grow closer to one another. It can make us stronger. It teaches us to adapt because most of the conflict we come in contact with our marriages it's all about selfishness, and we have to learn to adjust ourselves and to change some things so that we can be better because of it. Well, tonight I want to look at some practical things, some practical application to this conflict and how we can adjust in a positive way. These are just 3 simple rules, and I'm not going to tell you something you haven't already heard before, but I want us to look at these a little differently and try to think about them and try to see if we do these 3 things, it is going to help our marriages. It's going to help our communication. It's going to help the conflict that we do have when we do have it, because it will come, will help it be resolved and that solution to come quickly. And the first thing that we need to do is we need to make sure we're eager to listen. All right? Eager to listen. Now, when you get in, most of you might say, well, I am eager to listen. I'm willing to listen to her. I'm willing to find out what she has to say or what he has to say. But for the most part, you may say you're listening when you get into an argument. But you really might not be hearing them. Because when you're listening to them, most of the time when you say you're listening, you're trying to have your wheels turn in your head to try to find out, now what can I say in response to this and sound really cool? What can I say that's going to hurt her, that's going to make her see my point of view, that's going to make him see where I'm coming from? What can I say? Oh, I remember when she did this or when he did this back then. While your spouse is telling their side of the story, you don't hear it because you're thinking about what you're going to say in response, even though, have you ever had one of those arguments where your spouse says something to you and it really has nothing to do with what you're talking about? All right? That's because they didn't hear what you said. They've been thinking about what they're going to say in response to you. And that happens a lot. And if we're eager to listen to each other, if we're eager to listen to the other side of the story, that can be scary. Because what could happen is you're going to hear some things about yourself that you might not like. All right? You're going to hear some things about yourself that you might not really just enjoy hearing. But when you talk to each other and when you listen, your mate is encouraged to talk more. And they think that you're engaged in them, if you are. And when they're encouraged to talk more, they express themselves. And when they really express themselves, that gives you the opportunity to truly understand them. And that's where it comes into the intimacy factor. If me and Leah are arguing about something, and I'm not saying I do, let me say right off, don't go home and say, I want to work on our marriage so we can have a great marriage like Matt and Leah. We do have a great marriage. But don't think for 1 minute that these are all points that I came up with. That these are all things that I do all of the time. Because it's not. It's something I think we all have to work on. But if I'm truly engaged in her and I can understand her feelings and she's expressing them to me, that's where this intimacy comes in, to where I can know her. I can understand her and see things maybe through a different set of eyes, and vice versa for her. But we have to be eager to listen. We have to be eager to hear what the other one has to say. There are 4 rules for listening. I found these out. The first one is Observation. All right? If you're going to listen to someone and truly be engaged in them, you have to look at them. You have to watch them. You have to listen to what they're saying, but also watch their body language. Because their body language can say something along with how they say it. So you have to make sure you're observing them. You know how frustrated you can be if you're trying to talk to somebody and they don't look at you? You know? They're looking around, doing all, and I'm bad about this. You may be talking to me, and I may be looking at somebody else pointing over here or doing something, and I'm trying my hardest to focus, but it's something that I struggle with. So you've got to make sure that you have this observation about you're observing them. But then you got the concentration. Now, I practice this in front of the mirror. This is it right here, okay? Do that. If you do that in the mirror, look in the mirror and see how that looks, that's how your spouse wants, that's how you want your spouse to perceive you. I understand. You concentrate on them, because here's what you don't want to do. You don't want to get confused. You don't want to hear the facts in the wrong way. You want to make sure you are concentrating on them and listening to them. Then you want to make sure you have some consideration for them. You want to make sure that you have some consideration where you're not trying to catch them in error. You're not trying to find out when they're wrong. What you're trying to do is you're trying to be considerate and look at it through the other set of eyes. And then finally, this fourth little is the clarification. Sometimes if you're listening to somebody to make sure you understand it, you got to talk back to them and say, so let me get this straight. You say, if I say you look bad in that dress, that's a bad thing. You got to clarify it. You got to make sure you understand so you don't repeat that problem again. That's the way to adapt, church. That's the way this communication, that's the way conflict can make us stronger, is learning how to adapt in these ways. Look at this verse with me. Go to Proverbs. Proverbs 18. Proverbs 18, verse 13. If anyone gives an answer before he hears, now think about what that says. If any of you give an answer before you hear what someone is saying to you, it is his folly and his shame. How many times have we done that in our marriage relationship? Where we're poor listeners. You can't understand somebody unless you learn how to listen. We got to be eager to listen. We got to be eager to listen. Then we have to, the second step here out of the three practical observations is you got to watch your mouth. Because once you're eager to listen to them, then you got to watch what comes out of your mouth next. Because that can be very condemning to you as well. Let's stay here in Proverbs. Look at Proverbs 10. Proverbs 10, verse 19. I got 4 or 5 here in Proverbs that I think is very beneficial to us to look at. Proverbs 10, 19. When words are many, transgression is not lacking, but whoever restrains his lips is prudent. When words are many, transgression is not lacking. That means, if you put this in today's terms, that if you're going to run your mouth a lot, usually that means there's a whole lot of sin there. There's a whole lot of problems there. But the person who restrains his lips is prudent. So turn over a few chapters to chapter 17, verse 27. Proverbs 17, verse 27. Whoever restrains his words has knowledge, and he who has a cool spirit is a man of understanding. Restraining your words says you have knowledge. Don't we typically think the opposite? Let me tell you how smart I am. Let me tell you what all I know. Let me tell you what I understand about you. No, it's the person that learns how to restrain his words. Proverbs 21, verse 23. Whoever keeps his mouth and his tongue keeps himself out of trouble. Can't get any simpler than that, can you? Whoever controls his mouth keeps himself out of trouble. Over in Ecclesiastes, you can go over and it's going to say virtually the same kind of thing we've already read. Ecclesiastes chapter 5, verse 3. You're going to read something like the same thing. For a dream comes with much business, and a fool's voice comes with many words. Now, let's put this in perspective. Who's talking? Well, it's God talking. It's God talking through Solomon. What's Solomon's situation, guys? A lot of women, is it not? Wives and concubines, 1,000 women that he has in his life. You know how he's able to pen these words? It's because he's learned his lesson. You got to watch your mouth. You got to watch what you say. And it's not saying necessarily to keep quiet, because giving your mate the silent treatment is a bad idea. It's a bad idea. If you're having conflict, you don't give them the silent treatment. You don't yell at them, but you watch, you choose your words very carefully. You don't say things flippantly, because if you do, you can't pull them back. They're out there. And you don't want those words, those hurtful words that you might say to your spouse to come back and haunt you, because you picked that person and they picked you, and you married them for better, for worse, for richer, for poor, and you're supposed to stay with them till death do you part, and that can be a long time. So you want to make sure you don't say those things that are going to come back to bite you. You got to watch your mouth. There's an old Jewish rabbis used to say this about the tongue. And I never heard this. This is good. The ears are open and out, unguarded. Okay? Your ears are open and out. They're unguarded. There's nothing to protect your ears. But the tongue is behind those ivory bars. Think about that. All right? The ears are open and out, unguarded, but the tongue is behind those ivory bars. In the passage that was read a few minutes ago, that he read in Ephesians chapter 4, if you'll look at verse 29 there at Ephesians chapter 4, let no unwholesome word come out of your mouth, but only the words that are good for the edification of the body. Only say those things that are good for the building up, things that fit the occasion, things that sprinkle the salt on the occasion to make it better, not things that are going to make it worse. Because when we use our mouth, we go through, we take on certain roles. Now, the next phase of this lesson, you're going to look at it and you're going to see yourself in a lot of these roles. Because I've seen myself. And you're going to see your spouse in a lot of these roles. What you don't need to do is when you leave here tonight, get in your car and go home or go to dinner, you don't need to say, now he was talking about you when he said that. All right? This is where you watch the tongue. Because this is going to hit all of us in different capacities. The different roles that we play when we use our mouths inappropriately. All right? We play these roles. We play the judge. All right? We play the judge where we're trying to convict them and we're trying to let them know this is where you're at fault. This is the person that says you always or you never. They say things like, I told you so. You're just like your mother. You're just like your father. You just don't think. You're always in a bad mood. What's wrong with you? All you ever do is complain. I can't do anything to please you. You just think you're always right. Now, you're going to play the judge sometimes where you're ready to convict him. You're going to say, I've heard the situation. I've heard the argument. And as the judge of this situation, a lot of times this is us men, okay? As the man in this situation, I will have to say, this is your fault. This is your fault. And now it's time for you to be punished because I'm not going to treat you in the way you need to be treated. We play that role. But then sometimes we play the professor. Look at that face. Isn't that nice? Isn't that a nice face? We play the professor. And the professor is the role that does this. This says something along the lines of, you just don't understand women. You just don't understand the way a man thinks. This is the one that is usually the educated person in the family, usually the one that may have the higher education, and they always want to flaunt it. They always want it to be known. How can you be so beautiful and stupid at the same time? All right? And then she might say, as the professor, oh, well, the Lord made me beautiful to be attracted, but He made me stupid to fall for you. All right? We play this role, the professor. 1 Corinthians 13, we read this morning, love does not puff up. All right? Does not act unbecoming, unseemly. It's not easily provoked. It's not going to play this role. Then you have the psychologist. I believe that's the next one that's up there. The psychologist. This is the person that's always analyzing why the other person does what they do. All right? I'll tell you why you do this. You do this because this is what happened to us 6 weeks ago. This is the way you have always been. And they try to analyze the actions of their spouse and tell them the reason why they're doing certain things. You're playing the psychologist. Just don't worry. Unless you have letters after your name, like PhD, and unless you have that, don't try that. Don't try that, because it's not going to work. We can't play this role of the psychologist. It only makes things worse. The historian. I think you know where this is going. Always bringing up the past. I remember I was well acquainted with a family. This couple the wife was unfaithful to the husband. And I went to visit with the husband after the fact, and this happened several years ago, and it was hard for me. I didn't know how to handle myself. I didn't know what to say to him. I just went to let him know I was praying for him. I went to his work to talk to him, and as I talked to him, he let me know that he was taking her back. And I was happy for him that he was willing to take her back. I was happy for him. And he said that I promised her that I would stay faithful to her as long as we both shall live, for better, for worse. And Matt, I'm going to do that. I'm going to stay faithful to her. And he did for a while. But after a while, he could not do it any longer. And this is why. He played this role of the historian. Every time there was an argument, every time there was a minute disagreement, we were scheduled to go out to dinner with them a few times, and they'd call and say, we're not going to come. And the reason why is because they would get into a little tit here or there about something irrelevant, and then he would bring up and say, well, at least I didn't commit adultery. He forgave her, but he would not let her forget it. And when that happens, if we keep pulling up the past and reaching back to those things, we know it's still here. But we can't keep going back to the past and bringing up previous sins that they've already asked for forgiveness from, that they're already trying to move forward from. Because that doesn't help matters. A lot of times when we fight, we play the historian. And as I mentioned, there's a way to fight correctly. There's a way to fight fairly. That way we learn from and help our marriages, help the conflict. Then you have the dictator. This is the bully of the family. This is always demanding things. You better not ever let me catch you. And usually when they say things like that, it's with their mouth like this and their finger out. You better not ever let me catch you doing something like that again. You better not ever say that to me again. Pushing their weight around, the bully, demanding things. That's not going to work. The critic. This is the person who loves to compare you to someone else. Why can't you be more like Ben Kackelman? Why can't you be more like him? Look, he's got these 3 boys, got another one on the way, got a nice wife, and they never look like they're having fights. They're doing great. Why can't you be more like him? Why can't you get up and teach class like he does? Why can't you be nice like him, but instead you have to do what you do? No. My wife has never compared me to Ben Kackelman. He's just the guy I looked at when I looked up, okay? We can't compare ourselves. We can't compare our spouse to someone else. Then you got, and this is where I come into the picture, then you got the preacher. Because this is where, if you don't know the Bible verses, I'm the guy you call. Okay? You call me and you say, where in the Bible does it say that the wife is supposed to be in submission, Matt? Where in the Bible does it say this? And then they take that information, and me unknowingly where it's coming from, they'll go to them and then saying, you need to obey God. You're disobeying God by not being in submission. See what I mean? You can't use the Scriptures in the improper way and preach to your spouse. It doesn't work that way. It's not going to have growth happening. It's not going to happen. These are all the roles that we play, and we've got to be careful because they can get us into trouble. You got to watch your mouth. You got to watch what you say. You got to be eager to listen. And the last one here is you got to control your reaction. You got to control your reaction because this is where it all comes together. Go back to Proverbs chapter 16, verse 22. Just a couple verses here. Proverbs 16:22. Good sense is a foundation of life to him who has it, but the instruction of the fools is folly. Having good sense, making sure you're doing things the right way and not reacting poorly. Proverbs chapter 29. Proverbs 29, verse 22. A man of wrath stirs up strife, and one who gives in to anger causes much transgression, causes much sin. If you give in to your anger. You go back to the Ephesians passages and it reads like this. Don't let the sun go down on your anger. Be angry and sin not. It's okay to be angry. Christ was angry. Christ got angry at things. God got angry at times. But the reaction when you're angry is the pivotal thing. You watch your mouth, you make sure you listen, but that reaction that you have afterward, that is huge. If you react the wrong way, instead of helping that relationship get stronger, instead of bringing your spouse closer to you, you drive that wedge deeper and deeper, and that gap gets larger and larger to where there are things, it's not beyond repair, but you make it difficult to repair. Don't let the sun go down on your anger. Make sure you handle this. Don't go to bed angry with your spouse. Make sure you're able to tell them that you love them. You can tell them you're not happy with what they did. You can tell them that you're not excited about how this turned out. But you married them for a reason. Remember that. You picked them and they picked you. That's why I think it's important in the premarital counseling that I do. That's why I think it's important for people to see the fighting. They need to see the demon come out so that demon can be made aware so you know how they're going to react in certain situations. So it's not a surprise to you. And you don't come out and say, that's not the same person I picked several years ago. That they've changed. I got to tell you, I think these are wonderful points. Control your reaction. Watch your tongue. Be eager to listen. I love these points. And as I said, I do not do them perfectly. It's not something that I can say, I'm proud to say I've done all of these perfectly and I have the best marriage. Remember, there are no problems with marriage. There's always problems with individuals that they bring into marriage. But this is not my material. This is not mine. I borrowed it. And you've got it as well. If you look in James chapter 1, verse 19. Let every man, my beloved brothers, let every person be quick to hear, slow to speak, and slow to anger. It's right there in the Scriptures. These are the practical lessons for us to understand how we need to react when conflict comes. To take conflict in a positive light and use the conflict to make your marriage stronger, to learn how to adapt and be less selfish, to learn how to work together, to learn how to find a problem and look for the solution together, to learn how to make your spouse more Christ-like. We can do this. God knows we can. That's why He created the institution of marriage. But He knew from the beginning that marriage between two imperfect people is not going to make a perfect union. There's going to be struggles, there's going to be strife, and this is how you learn to handle it. As we talked earlier, there is the strife that we have within. I think that's this morning's invitation song, isn't it? So he's got a different invitation song. This is not the correct one. If you'll take that off, Andrew. But when you look at your life and you look at the conflict that you have with God and the sin that you've driven, that wedge between you and God, maybe there's conflict between you and your spouse. Maybe there's some things that you need to come off your chest. That's not necessarily something that you come and respond publicly and say, I've treated my wife poorly, unless you've done so in a public manner. Or I've treated my husband poorly, unless you've done so in a public manner where everybody has seen it and everybody knows, and you want everybody to know that you're sorry for what you've done. And maybe that does fit you. Maybe that fits us sometimes. Sometimes we do things that we regret. It doesn't mean you're a bad person. It just means you made some bad choices. And we've all been there, haven't we? We've all been there. So look at your life, and if there's something amiss that you need to fix with this conflict, you and your wife, you and your husband, work on that tonight. Make your marriage better. Use it to help your marriage become more fruitful in the work of God's kingdom. But if there's something that you need to change tonight that affects your salvation, then you need to do that. You need to come repenting of sin. You need to come asking for prayers. You need to come to be baptized if you haven't done that yet and have your sins washed away and become a child of God. And having that ability to have forgiveness at any given time you need it by that washing, that regeneration, the windshield wiper effect, that when we sin and we ask for forgiveness, He takes it away. Whatever you have, please come as we stand and sing the song of invitation.
You are the words and the music. You are the song that I sing. You are the melody. You are the harmony. Praise to your name I will bring. You are the Lord of lords. You are the mighty God. You are the King of all kings. So now I give back to you the song that you gave to me. You are the song that I sing.